Today we're going to be learning about how to bring life back to your dull photos. Sometimes they're underexposed or sometimes the lighting conditions weren't right. In this case we've got a before picture and we've got a after picture here. This is what I was able to do in Photoshop. As you can see, this is pretty underexposed. I caught this very last second. I was in Alfama, Portugal, and this boy was running down an alley with a soccer ball, and I just grabbed a couple of frames. And at first I thought I wouldn't be able to use this image, but looking at the end result, I think I was able to make it work. I am satisfied with this result. So let's jump into it. We're going to use Lightroom and we're going to use Photoshop. Just because they both can do different things, that's going to help bring out the picture that you want. In Lightroom, what I like to do is bring the image to a base that I'm happy with in terms of exposure, contrast, saturation, and then we fine tune it further in Photoshop. So first thing I do here, I import it in Lightroom. I like to make sure the profile is Adobe neutral. A lot of the times it's defaulted to Adobe Color or something else, so make sure you set it to Adobe neutral to really just get as flat an image as possible with your raw photo. So first I'm just going to bring up the exposure. Okay, I like how this part here is now properly exposed, but back here is just a bit overblown, so we'll fix that. Second thing I'll do is look at the color temperature. Am I happy with this? Okay, it's a bit blue here, a bit warm. Yeah, we'll keep it neutral, which is basically where it was at before. So 473. The tint, it was at 8 before. I'm gonna keep it like that because it looks nice. As you can see here, I've overexposed it by 3.5 stops, which is a lot. So you can see all this grain here. So what I'm going to do is go down to noise reduction and just play with this. You don't want to have it too high, otherwise the image just looks mushy. So I'm just going to set it to 30 and also just reduce the sharpening a bit. Okay, that's better. Actually increase the sharpening. Keep it where it was at before. Okay, so next thing I do after I've got a bit of everything dialed in, not completely locked off yet, then I export a version to Photoshop. One thing I do to bring out the image is to really separate the backgrounds in terms of exposure. So I want the focus to be on the boy. So what I've done is I've exported another copy for the background. So that way the boy can be the center and then the background can be about the same or a bit darker. And so I've done that in Photoshop here. So I've exported 2 different exposure versions from Lightroom. Okay, and just to see the steps quickly, I've got the finished version here and all the steps here, as you can see. So I'm just going to uncheck group. This is what we started with first. And then I brought in a layer and then I erased part of one layer, one of the 2 exports I made, so that the image can be a bit more blended. And then I worked on the face to bring out the boy. Then I dodged and burned a bit of the background. And then I do a global adjustment, which is again just fine-tuning the image in terms of saturation, contrast, exposure. Okay, it pops a bit, and then little finishing touches. You don't have to, but I like to do a channel mixer and have one of these as it effects. It just Does things, different things to your pictures. I usually keep it as soft light, very low opacity. Just gives it a little extra crunch. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I built all this up. So we've got the two exports from Lightroom. I'm going to copy this one and paste it on top of another. And then I'm going to add a mask so I can erase part of the background. And if I need to get it back, that's fine. Masking instead of using the eraser tool, because you won't get it back unless you undo a lot of your steps. So with masking, you just have black and white as taking away or bringing back the original, and it's non-destructive. You can always see for, let's see here, I'll show you. You can see here I've erased part of this to bring back the original background. And if I just swap this, you'll see I can bring it back easily. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back the blown background. There's two things I'm looking at here, three things for the picture. Is I want this as one separate layer, then this big shade here I want as another separate layer, and then this boy I want as a separate layer. First I'm going to reduce the background. Just make sure you have your opacity for the brush nice and low so everything blends in real nice, and then keep your hardness low as well so the edges are feathered. Just makes everything blend in a bit nicer. Okay, so I'm just gonna start erasing. Okay, as you can see, it's coming back. Pretty blown out here. I'm just gonna bring this down. Okay. It's looking much better already. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is focus on bringing out this background. So again, after I imported from Lightroom into Photoshop, I will also play around with the levels and curves before I do some fine-tuning with the image in terms of dodge and burn. So bringing up my curves. Oops. Another thing you can do is once you feel like you have a good layer or base to work with, just bring it down as one layer. If you don't want to lose it, just duplicate it, hide this layer, and then merge this layer with the one below. Okay. Okay, so I'm happy with this image, so I'm going to do a bit more fine-tuning. Got some levels. Every picture is different. Sometimes you play around with it a lot, sometimes you don't at all. You can even look into this. This is an interesting trick. Monochromatic contrast just adds a bit of kick. So I like what it's doing, so I'm going to keep it. And then I'll bring up the curves. Okay, I'm liking this. So we've come a long way from this to this already. I still want to bring out the boy, so I'm going to make another layer just for him. If it helps, you can label your layers. I kind of have the same process for every picture, so I usually know where all the layers are and what they do. So this one's going to be for the boy. And then in here, I just bring out the dodge and burn tools. Again, it's kind of like with levels, curves. When you use those tools, that affects the whole image. When you use dodge and burn, you can set, as you can see here, the brush or the bubble for specific parts of the image. So this is really powerful. So I'm going to see here. Keep it nice and low exposure, hardness, keep it low, and let's get into it. Still pretty noisy. We can always reduce that a bit later. Alright, you can see I've added more life to his face. I'll bring down the burn. I'm just going to darken the edges a bit. Go back to dodge. Okay, let's see what we did. Okay, it's looking good. Now you can always spend more time playing around with it. For this purpose of the tutorial, I'm pretty happy with where everything is. Let me just bring up this side a bit more. Perfect. Okay, now once that's done, just make another layer, and then now I do the same process for everywhere but the boy. So I like to vignette the edges of my image to draw the eye, the center of attention, more towards the center of the image. So mid-tones, I might even increase the exposure a bit. As you can see, we're getting some nice vignetting going on here. Okay, the background's still a bit bright and blown out, so I'm just going to hit highlights. Make sure the exposure is low when you're working on burning the highlights because it adds like a flat layer. There we go. Okay, I'm liking this much better. And now I might look at the cobblestones. I want to make it more contrasty. You can see it's already got highlights, midtones, and shadows. So I'm just going to accent them, bring them out more. Bring up the shadows. And then highlights. Leave it at 1% because I just want a slight pop. Might even work on the soccer ball. Perfect. Okay, pretty good. Oops, gotta keep it on burn. Still it's still a bit blown out here. I could have brought down the exposure earlier on. This is something you can always do too. But for now, I'm just going to burn it a bit because it doesn't really bother me when I look at the whole image. So now we've got the before, the after, and before. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's pretty easy. It's about massaging the image, looking at it in terms of, you know, your brightest point, your darkest point, what you want to bring out. A good thing to keep in mind too is the lighting motivation. Like, where is the main source of lighting coming from? Because once you start doing a lot of work, you're gonna and you want it to look natural in terms of lighting, you're going to want to shape the light in the direction it comes in. So for the boy, as you can see, I've got the light on his face. You can see it's coming from a certain angle. It's just above him, a little bit to his right. It's probably the bounce lighting from the alley, but that's what I'm going to work with. This is the brightest part, so I'm not going to make another part of his face the brightest. I'm just going to accent and work with what's already here. Okay, so the last thing I might do, because it was pretty noisy, is just do noise reduction. And again, this was pretty underexposed, like 3.5 stops as you saw, so I'm just trying to do the best I can reducing noise, but this is not going to be a large print, so it looks good in this kind of format. It looks good when I post it to Instagram, so this worked. This is how I was able to bring back a dull photo that I thought I wouldn't be able to work with. And I've done this many times with other photos, and I'm going to have other tutorials that show you that process. I hope this was simple enough for you to understand how to work with any kind of photo that you have that you think you can bring back to life. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Like and subscribe for more. I've got a lot coming your way. Thanks for stopping by.